So Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are being bashed online for openly supporting the H1B visa program, and it sparked a lot of debate online, especially in Reddit, with people wondering if these visa holders are going to stop you guys from having opportunities at getting in the tech field or even keeping your jobs in the tech field in the future. And in this video, I'm going to go ahead and check out a Reddit post related to the topic, give you guys my experience with visa holders, and also let you know whether or not you should be concerned and how you can protect yourself from losing opportunities. Long story short, you guys are probably going to hope you get a Squid Games card here soon because it's not looking too good. Let's check out the details. So we've got this guy named Vivek on the IT career questions subreddit asking what are people's thoughts on companies using H1B workers over local talent, aka US citizens. And I'm gonna go ahead and give my feedback and experience on it. But before we do that, in case you don't know what an H1B visa is, it's essentially a short-term visa. It's about 3 to 6 years and it can be extended if someone's applying to get citizenship instead. That allows a foreigner to work in the United States and reside in the United States. Now, in order for them to get one of these visas, they need to actually have a company that sponsors them. In order for companies to be able to sponsor a foreigner, they have to have justification essentially stating that they've got these job postings that they cannot find local talent to fulfill. And generally, these H1B visa holders have some additional talent, experience, or education that they can't find in the local populace, and they need these guys to fill these roles. Now, that's just black and white, essentially what it is. I've got my opinions on it, and I'll give you guys that here in a few. But in short, that's what an H1B visa is. It's essentially a company sponsoring a foreigner to work in the United States. All right, so now that we know what an H1B visa is, let's go ahead and check out this Reddit post, and then I'll give my experience with these guys afterwards. All right, so we got Vivek here, and he basically said, I'm just going to summarize a little bit of it, but lately he's been thinking about the use of H1B workers in the tech field, and he wonders how it affects US talent, US locals being able to actually get these jobs. He's curious about hearing people's thoughts. He's wondering if companies rely on HB workers just to cut costs, or is it more about filling those specialized roles that the US local populace can't cover? He says he's wondering if we have any personal experience with any of these guys. And he says he knows it's a heated topic, which it definitely is. If you look on Reddit or even Twitter right now, you can see it's crazy. But he just wants to know what everybody thinks about it. And if we scroll down here, we can see this guy, EasyBadge6919. He says H1B is favored by companies because they want to have captive employees that can't leave and can't escape. This is why my company wants them. This is why Elon wants them. I would argue it's not even cheaper. It's just about control. And I'll give my opinion on that here, but I think he does have some valid points there. We got another guy here that says it's definitely cheaper to pay $70,000 for an Indian rather than $150,000 for an American citizen. Okay, and we got this other guy here who's saying, basically if you want to avoid being replaced by an H1B visa holder, find an industry where data must be, number one, hosted in the US only, and can only be accessed by US citizens. And I'd say that's actually pretty smart. And then we got another guy here who's basically saying there are some awesome H1B workers that he's worked with before. However, the majority are more trouble than they're worth. Communication, documentation, and people skills are severely lacking. The worst part is everyone involved in these situations is getting shafted except the bottom line, and that's something you're going to want to remember, the bottom line. The H1B person is not getting paid enough to actually care. The local talent is getting laid off and not hired at all since H1B workers are cheaper, and the customers are getting worse experience. And another guy here says it's being abused and really should be reduced. There's no rare talent across the sea which we can't find here, especially with how many tech workers have been laid off this year. That's pretty interesting. But another guy here is saying where is job listings? It's posted on LinkedIn, and I'll show you guys for those you can see H1B visa postings. But that's kind of what's been going on. This is actually pretty tamed in comparison to what people are posting on Twitter. But now I'm going to go ahead and give you guys my experience with H1B visa holders. Now, regarding my experience working with H1B visa holders, it was very limited. I actually only have one specific guy that I did work with who was sponsored via H1B, and that's primarily because I supported DoD military networks and systems following getting out of the Army. In order to do that, you have to have a clearance, and of course these guys can't get a clearance, therefore I never really interacted with them. But I did work for one public company who did sponsor an H1B visa holder, and he was a system administrator. And right off the rip, I can tell you right now, this guy was great. His personality was awesome. You couldn't understand him half the time. He was Indian, and it just so happens that 70% of the guys that are sponsored via H1B for the United States are Indian, followed by like 10%, which is China. But regardless of that, yeah, it was kind of hard to understand him, which plays into my experience working with him. In terms of knowledge base, I would say he wasn't the description that you would think based off of what H1B says. He wasn't like one of the top 10 guys. He was actually very general based knowledge, and there was a lot of stuff that he lacked, honestly. There was one specific time where I was creating a network for him that was being pushed to servers via ESXi and vCenter. And of course, when you push a physical network to that, they have to create the corresponding port group in vCenter. And I would tell him multiple times when I would do it that, hey, just because the network was pushed on the physical side doesn't mean it's there yet. you have to create the corresponding VLAN and port group in vCenter. And he would go ahead and set up his virtual machine, get it deployed, and go to attach to that network and realize it's not there. And I'd have to remind him, hey, you got to create the port group. And that's just one minor thing. I mean, there was many other things that popped up, which you would think a basic server administrator would know, but he didn't. And no matter how many times you've reminded him, he could not get it. In addition to that, we've talked about communication and documentation. Someone mentioned that here in Reddit. After we would complete a project, of course, that would come with documentation. Anybody in IT knows that if you're in a good shop, you're supposed to be documenting stuff after it's completed, honestly, while you're doing it. And we would go through and accumulate all the documentation for that specific project. And when we needed the server related stuff, we could never get it. If we did get it, it was so hard to understand. You think it's hard to understand these guys on YouTube? Imagine trying to read their English. It was horrible. And it would get to the point where we would have to have another server admin who was working with him actually do the documentation instead. And of course, that's just my experience, but there was other people here who noted the same thing in this Reddit alone. And of course, you can probably find a lot of other instances of that everywhere. I mean, just think about it, not just H1B visa programs, but the way these companies outsource a lot of stuff to India and other countries. I mean, every single time you call somebody, if it's not a robot, it's probably a guy from India, and it can be extremely frustrating to understand what's going on and for them to understand you. That's not their fault. That's just a communication barrier, but it is something that the consumers and us as, the local populace are going to be experiencing the most and being frustrated with. But anyways, that's my experience. Now, regarding my opinions on this whole thing and whether or not you should be concerned, I'm going to go ahead and say right off the rip, I'm going to have to call a spade a spade. Honestly, I'm not an economics expert or foreign policy expert. However, we all know that these companies are concerned about one primary thing, and that's their bottom line. And this is a good way to shoo these guys in to get cheap labor for minimal pay. Now, if you actually go ahead and look at some job postings from these companies that will sponsor H1B visas, you're going to see it's not anything that's crazy. It's a lot of jobs that anybody in the current US local populace can learn. Whether or not it's an entry job or whatever it may be, anybody can learn it. Let's go ahead and actually take a look at some of them here. So if I actually go over to some of these job postings here, we'll just go ahead and look at Indeed. I mean, you can see all kinds of stuff here. A physical therapist. I mean, there's people who are going to physical therapy school. You can see here, I'm mainly looking at tech stuff because that's what I know. Junior level data engineer, a business analyst here, entry level QA. We got entry level .NET software developer, a system administrator. My guy probably left. An HR administrative assistant, entry-level full-stack developer, software developer. I mean, there are so many people around here who can actually do these jobs, and a lot of them will take it for a minimal pay as it is just so they can learn. But it's not just about them taking the initial minimal pay, and I'm gonna go ahead and cover that as well. So of course they argue that a lot of these jobs are based off of the fact that they can't find qualified people. And sure, that could be the case, but I can tell you now, a lot of the people that they're hiring on via H1B visa are not qualified as it is. And even if they were, that's not the main reason they're hiring them on. They're hiring them on because, of course, yes, they're going to be cheaper, but also, like the other guy had mentioned, is they can be controlled. The whole reason they wanted to get out of the country is because they know, the United States is home of opportunity, and they want to come here and they want their families to be here. Well, how do they stay here? Is obviously via this program. And of course, they're not going to want to rock the boat with the companies that are sponsoring them. So they're going to do whatever they need to do. They're going to say whatever they need to say, and they're going to make their company happy. Whether that be not taking actual promotions every year, that's fine with them. As long as they're in the United States, they don't care. They'll keep the same pay for 6 years, as opposed to someone else who, yes, might be entry level, might take the job for bare minimum as a US guy. But in 2 years, how much experience they're going to have? They're not going to want to stay with the same current pay, especially with inflation already, causing them to lose money year after year. They're going to have to go ahead and jump. And that's what a lot of people do now. They jump jobs every 1 to 2 years. And, these companies don't want to have to deal with that. They want to go ahead and get someone who's going to be there long term and is going to stay for cheap, and they can control. And that's one of the primary things I think is the reason why they want these H1B visa holders. Quick interruption. I just want to go ahead and say thank you guys for helping me hit 500 subscribers. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and announce my giveaway winner for the Raspberry Pi 5. And that is Christopher Allard. Hit me up on Instagram or Twitter, let me know it's you and showing proof, and I'll get that baby shipped out to you. And don't worry if you didn't win. When I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing another giveaway, and I'll announce the details of that here shortly. But anyways, back to the video. And now, of course, you also want to be concerned that it's primarily the top 1% that are supporting these H1B visas. And of course, if it's the top 1% supporting it, you probably want to do the opposite of whatever they're saying you should do. And of course they support it. Some of the top companies that primarily get these H1B visa holders include Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and including Tesla as well, which is of course why, Elon's being bashed about it because he was openly supporting it. And of course, these guys want cheap labor if they possibly can get it. And that's because the top expense for many companies is personnel and payroll. So if they can get it cheaper, of course they will. And if they can control it and continue to keep it cheaper while inflation rises and their overall income increases, while they keep their current base operating expenses the same, they're going to do it. So they want H1B visas. They don't want spoiled US citizens. And at the end of the day, just remember that, of course, the one thing they're concerned about, like the guy on Reddit, and probably you already know, is they're only concerned about their bottom line. So of course, that's why they want to do it. But now what can you do about it? What can you do to protect yourself from losing your job to an H1B visa holder? Of course, one of the things I'm going to recommend is continue to grind, continue to learn as much as you can. Find those different unique and niche technologies and stuff like that that are kind of going to make you irreplaceable. But remember, no one's irreplaceable. You're always going to have to continue to learn. You're going to have to continue to adapt, look at different trends, and try and get ahead of everybody else. And of course, like the other guy mentioned on Reddit, you're going to want to find jobs that require US citizens to operate. I would recommend, of course, if you can, find a job that supports the Department of Defense and potentially works for classified systems. And that's because you're going to need some sort of clearance, which these guys probably aren't going to be able to get anytime soon. That's going to kind of future-proof yourself a little bit. Now, of course, with Elon getting involved with the government, things can change. Of course, he's one of the top government contracts with SpaceX being involved. But of course, I mean, it is generally going to be a lot safer if you have a clearance. Now, it can be hard to get a clearance, and generally if you have one, you're going to get paid more, which is great. But one of the primary reasons why you get paid more is because they are so hard to get. But if you can get a clearance, I would recommend it. One of the main ways you can do that, of course, is joining the military. That's how I got mine. But those are just a couple ways on how you can try and future-proof yourself and stop yourself from losing a job opportunity. But in the end of the day, I mean, you never know. You're going to want to have a few things up your sleeve. That's why I'm sitting here talking to the internet, looking at this camera. I'm trying to get a YouTube thing going, trying to start a business, and continuing to try and learn from my current job, just in case. You never know what happens with this economy and the way it's going currently. But that's just my take on it, guys. Are H1B visa holders something you should be concerned about? I mean, I'll leave that up to you guys. What do you think in the comments down below? I would say you're probably going to want that Squid Games card. If you do get it, you might as well just take it, because you probably have a better chance at being successful with that. Nah, I'm just kidding, guys. I think it'd be all right. But let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.